Great. Well, we're here with Sue Gordon, who's a titan of the intelligence community and government service, having served in the CIA for 27 years. What can you tell the audience about your career?
For me, to live a life of purpose that is also interesting was a dream. And because of the range of experiences that the CIA allowed, I got to do a bit of analysis, a bit of building systems, a bit of information technology, a bit of analytic tools. I was at the beginning of really the cyber revolution, and then just kind of moved through it in the best career. I had no right to it, but I'm grateful for it. And I guess, I think I tell people all the time, the best first 5 years of anyone's career, I don't care whether Google is offering you more money than God, your best first 5 years are somewhere in the national security apparatus. You will learn about big purpose, and you will be given responsibility super young.
That's a great point. I'm a former Fed, and I tell young people that all the time. You'll do things you'll never get the opportunity to do in your life again. So I couldn't agree with you more. So Sue, that brings me to what I think is one of the most important components for cybersecurity today, and that is this idea of public-private partnership, and the idea that governments and private industry need to work more closely together. What are your thoughts?
There isn't a solution that doesn't go through public-private partnership for the reason I alluded to earlier, which is the threat surface. When the world became digitally connected, these physical barriers, including those that we created that we believed in, were obliterated. And so now adversaries are going to private companies. The government can't go into those. That's not the way our system prefers to work. And companies are working globally and have access to a lot of data of things happening. So we've got to both share data, and we are in a shared purpose of security, and we have to do that together. So I don't think there's any way that we get to a future that is cyber secure without both the public and private entities and their value propositions coming together to find some solutions. And I guess I would throw into this the private citizen. We a lot of times miss that disinformation is a part of a cyber threat. And I would say that cyber threats are really an assault on trust. And trust is so much more important to free and open societies than it is to authoritarian. And our adversaries know this. So making us not believe in our systems, not believe in our information is one of the things we're trying to achieve. And again, this is a shared purpose we have to have.
That's a really interesting point. Let me shift a little bit to this idea of the federal government taking a leadership role. President Biden's issued a number of cybersecurity executive orders since he's been in office, which largely rely on the goodwill and compliance of private industry, right? So what are your thoughts on the effectiveness of the government setting the standard on cybersecurity direction for the nation to support national security?
So I think we tried it without, right? I think we tried it with the way the government prefers to work with the private industry, which is to let it set standards and be explosively creative and successful and competitive, and that has worked. I think what we saw is that companies either didn't realize the role, the responsibility they had for national security, or it was a cost center that they were deciding whether they were going to spend the money on and invest in cybersecurity. So I think we tried it with the hands off, and I think we recognized is that we were putting ourselves too much at risk without sharing the information. So I think we had to come together. So I like that the government's trying to both share more information so that companies can say, oh, that's what's happening, I can make decisions that are sound. I don't mind that they're trying to set some standards because if you're going to hold them responsible, it'd be nice to tell them what would be a good standard to keep. And my analogy to this is, in 1921, when the stock market crashed, the US government said, oh my gosh, the health of our companies is a national security matter. You see the rise of the SEC and the introduction of generally accepted accounting principles, which was the government saying we're going to regulate, and the industry saying, okay, these are the right principles, I can squint at this moment and say that would be the perfect thing to me.
Yeah.
Taking a breath, though, I think where I love the administration is going to set a standard, I love that they're saying what's important. I still think there's distance to travel in terms of setting a shared value proposition and allowing the private sector to have more of a voice in how that security is achieved than just over-regulating it. Because I'm afraid we'll get compliant, but we won't be dealing with the risk in the creative way if we do it differently.
Yeah, and let's face it, there's so much innovation in
Yeah.
the private
Right.
sector. We're going to solve our own problems
Right.
given the opportunity. So
Exactly right.
I
So
couldn't
once
agree
we've
more.
all decided that we're in this shared moment, then I think the government is better served if they allow industry and private companies to have more of a voice.
Yeah, and I think a good example of how the government's trying to regulate this space and incentivize innovation is the way DoD is laying out multiple cybersecurity requirements for their suppliers. And really, what their response is, hey, you want to be a supplier to the DoD? You got to follow these. Standards. And you've been around Veeam a little bit. You've been around other companies that have tried to achieve certain levels of certification or achieve enhancements to their programs so that we can be a trusted supplier of the DoD. What are your thoughts on what Veeam has done as a company and what other companies have done to establish that trust with the national security apparatus of the United States?
So I hope we share the story of Veeam because I think the way it has interacted with the government in a really interesting way. Number one is the company thought it was doing the right things, right? Before the government got involved, the company thought it was doing the right things. And then the government has a particular view of risk. It's a different view. And it introduced some requirements on the company. What Veeam did, seriously, I think your leadership just did such a good job on this, is not just either reject out of hand the requirements by saying they're not the right ones, nor did you all just follow exactly what they wanted. In my estimation, what your leadership team did was say, I'm going to understand the intention. I understand what your concerns are. I'm not going to fight them off, which is a really tempting thing to do. We're going to look at what you're trying to have us achieve, what you need us to be. And we're going to then propose to you a set of actions that we believe will demonstrate that, one, we are a serious partner, that we own the risk in the same way the government does, and we think we can come up with creative solutions. And I think if you look at that story, the results you've had with the government, the trust that you have engendered with your partners out, it is because of the approach you took. I think it's a great model. It's not an easy model. Compliance is sometimes easier and rejection is easy, but I think what you were able to do is to put into play a company and a capability that will serve society well, and it is a trusted partner of the government's interests, and that is like nirvanic in terms of the outcome you want.
Great. So you've been working cyber issues since the dawn of cyber security, even before the word was probably coined. And we all just saw a clip from the movie War Games, which is an old movie. It seems like that may have been the first hacking movie that I can recall.
I think it's about the right time, right?
Late 70s, early 80s.
Early 80s,
Yeah.
and that's right about the time that we have ARPANET and the first internet browser, and you start seeing, I think, first things gone awry, then nation states, especially with the rise of non-state actors and terrorist threats, you see state actors moving into the space. But it's still pretty limited through most of the 2000s to a few that have big resources and big things to do. And then in 2010, you have that big nation-state tool called Stuxnet that hit the front page of the Post and the Times, and it kind of broke cyber out of the technical world, and it put its intention and its potential on the front page. And from then we just scream into anyone can buy an offensive tool. The digital space gets transparent. You see more state actors and non-state actors using the digital space. And so you start seeing theft of data, using cyber to settle scores, the Sands Casino,
Oh, gosh,
right?
yeah.
And then you see the rise of ransomware, and you haven't lost cyber as a tool of any adversary and competitor. So it's really interesting how you started in a small technical world with the hackers doing interesting things, and now it's a mainstream capability.
Mainstream and billions of dollars in business.
Billions of dollars in business.
And it's truly become this asymmetric warfare directed against private industry and small business. And the impacts of that have been unbelievable.
Yeah, I think what happened somewhere along that arc is we realized that the threat surface was no longer confined to the government, and national security decision makers were not just in Washington, but they were actually sitting in boardrooms when they decided how they were going to protect the data that adversaries and competitors would use for advantage. And so when that happens, it becomes big industry. People have to protect themselves, and you're at this moment. I think what's a little depressing is that for all the visibility that we now have of what can be achieved through cyber, and all the awareness we have that data is really the coin of the realm, we're still struggling to protect ourselves as well as we might. So I think there's still work to be done, but it's been an interesting ride.
Yeah, I think the idea of cyber resilience in the last decade has become really the forefront of the thinking on cybersecurity, right? You hear it all the time. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And your ability to recover from an event like that is probably now more important than ever.
Yeah, you're never going to be perfect. You cannot
Can't
be
be
perfect. But the successful entity is going to have sound protections in their network so you can trust the networks, sound protection of your data, and then a good understanding of the risks that you're buying when you do that. And if you can do those three things, you're going to be well positioned to both have continuity of operations for your entity, but also do your part for society to not overexpose that which is important to us.
And when everything goes against you and you know what hits the fan, having the ability to completely back up and restore very easily your operational environments, I think now is more key than ever.
Absolutely. And it gives you the confidence to be able to conduct business, because one of the things the adversaries want us to do is to stop. If you can withstand and recover, then you're not giving in to what our adversaries and competitors would have us do.
Great point. So you've seen a lot in your career, right? And your private industry career recently. What do you see for the future? What's the next big threat over the horizon that worries someone like Sue Gordon, who's seen 27 years worth of things happening at the CIA?
The craft around using the digital space to conduct activities that are against somebody else's is advancing as fast as the environment in which we can operate. And so I think we haven't heard as much recently about sophisticated cyber attacks. The capabilities are advancing. The risk is still there. It has all the advantages that it used to. And so I think that will always be a part of our future, is having to be aware, understand, and be resilient. So I think that's going on. I think AI, while I'm on the positive side of AI because I think its potential to allow us to do the things we want to do is greater than I'm afraid of it. But AI will come into the cybersecurity realm, and we'll have to be ready for it. And again, it's one of those volumetric things where it allows you to do more things on more fronts against more unprotected surfaces. And I think we'll just have to keep on getting smarter. But that's going to evolve, and I think we're on the path. I guess what I worry about the most now is just how unsettled the world is, that even though it seems to be vibrating where people don't quite know where the red line is, and so everyone's kind of self-governing their activity, but simultaneously the capability is increasing. So anytime you get into conflict, anytime there's a mistake, the consequence is greater because the capability has improved even while it wasn't in use. So I want no one to rest. I think what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East, what could happen in China, and just what's happening here is just a very dynamic situation. You will not know when the disruption is going to happen. So I guess I would encourage everyone to think about, what do you wish you'd do now, left of when that disruption is going to happen, because it is going to happen.
It will happen, for sure.
So prepare now. You know, we talk about exercising for ransomware. I think we need to practice for more than that. Think about what you would do now, anticipating the kinds of disruption that would come.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I appreciate your optimism around AI. I do think it's a double-edged sword.
It is.
The promise of it as a defensive tool is pretty exciting as well. I used to have a boss in government who told me, you know, we're being attacked at light speed and we want to call a meeting, right? So we want to be faster when it comes to defense and response and being able to take dynamic actions on the fly. And I think AI is going to represent some significant opportunities for us to actually do that.
I think like all technology, it is a double-edged sword, but to me, this isn't a world where I can hold, right? That this is you have to be advancing. And if you're not advancing, you are in more peril, because there are others who will, without the same concerns about regulation and ethics and things you have. So I think we have to get on our horse. I love understanding what the technology, what risk our use of the technology introduces, and applying it to areas where we can bear that risk. But we got to get on with imagining what it can do for us, because our adversaries are not going to be as concerned as we are.
Well, I want to thank you, Sue, for your perspective. It was fascinating and really interesting to hear about your government service. And thank you so much for supporting VeeamON's Resiliency Summit. We hope to see you again. Back to you, Danny.